Have you ever been in an ICU?
My
The
God,
incessant beeping?
constant.
That's what we're fixing.
Okay.
So this is a problem that has been designated unsolvable for 50 plus years, and we're able to solve it because we're bringing a unique perspective. The unique perspective is that CalmWave is a hybrid of enterprise IT operations expertise and fantastic clinicians and physicians working together to finally solve this. The enterprise IT operations expertise is important because we also suffered from the problem of alarm fatigue at scale, solving this problem for Fortune 100 companies, right? And doing operations for Fortune 100 companies. So one of the unique advantages that we have is that we have a data set that no one has ever put together. And that is important because you can't provide guidance to the clinicians without them understanding the why, right? You can't just say, hey, you should change this alarm limit and they'll do it. They won't, because ultimately they're the ones who are responsible, right? So if you think about the core of the problem, the bedside device manufacturers, the ones who build the bedside monitors that monitor the patient vital signs, uh, today they compete on price and marketing, right? They have the ability for users to adjust the alarm limits, but there's no guidance provided to those users, right? And the negative ramifications of making a mistake after you've had a really hard shift, and it's 3:18 a.m. and you're making a change when a patient is in distress, that negative outcomes could be profound. You could lose your license, or God forbid, somebody dies, right? And so what we do is we ingest data from two isolated silos in a hospital system. One is the EHR, and that's medications, interventions, labs, notes, nurse to patient assignments, and more. And the middleware that's aggregating the high frequency vitals from the entire hospital. We then unify and fuse those two isolated data sources together into what we call our CalmWave common signal format. And this is a well-structured format designed from the ground up for data science. So imagine, for example, here's a sphere of this hospital system's data that we've now normalized, right? What we do is we build what we call views into that sphere. A view is like a porthole where you're peering into this data set. And then we have lenses on those views. A lens is the depth of the data that you're looking into from an individual, and that could be a patient, it could be a nurse, it can be a device, a unit, a hospital, a network of hospitals, and a benchmark of hospitals, right? So that orientation is important because what you see here, these are the views, right? These columns are the views. These are the lenses. So navigating this enormous data set is very straightforward, right? So where everything starts is what we call threshold manager. So threshold manager is where we provide guidance for the clinicians on when to make safe updates to the alarm limits. And I think one of the things that's really important here is our platform is designed in an opposite way of what is the status quo today. Status quo today is that clinicians typically make changes when a patient is in distress to shut the alarms up, right? So that usually happens in very broad jumps, right? So like a high heart rate limit of 140. So that's 140 beats per minute. Anything over that, you'll hear a beep, right? So we see at times jumps of 20, 30, even 40 points, because that's a clear sign of alarm fatigue. They're broadening them so much that everything is quiet. But now that's not a safe opportunity to make an adjustment. So what we do is we first cluster together vital sign abnormalities into what we call an incident. And an incident is a container of context of something bad is happening. So here's all the vitals associated with this incident. We do that so that we understand when a patient is stable. So first we learn when a patient's unstable because we're looking for when a patient is stable, because CalmWave is designed so we only provide recommendations when a patient is stable. And when we do provide recommendations, they're small amounts, 5 points at a time, right? So that makes a big difference. So what you're seeing here is Threshold Manager at a unit level view. We pull in the actual floor plan of the unit so that the clinicians are anchored in their physical reality. And we embed into their existing workflow. So this isn't we provide an alert to tell them to update their alarm limits. They're already inundated by alarms. Instead, it happens during patient assessment. They're already in the patient's room. They're already logged into Epic. We're single signed on to Epic. They launch CalmWave from the Epic main menu or in the patient flow sheet. And When they launch in the patient flow sheet, they come into CalmWave in the patient context. So what you're seeing here, these are the lookbacks from 24 hours to 1 hour. These are the recommendations for adjustments. So let's say you're the nurse with a patient in B346. You can come in and you can say, for example, if I'm launching from Epic, here's the patient's name, here's the room, here's the vital to change, here are the current settings, low of 50, high of 140. Our recommendation is to go to 125, meaning go tighter, which is earlier warning. So if you know how to do it, this is literally 15, 20 seconds and you're done. But let's say you want to know more, right? Let's say you want to know why this guidance is being provided. So you click on it, and here what you're seeing are the vital signs. We also overlay the vasoactive medications on top of the vitals. So you can see the drug name, the classification, the start time, the end time, the dosage, the rate. So they can even monitor the titrations overlaid on the vitals. But going back to the recommendation, we have 5 safety gates that all must be true before we'll ever surface a recommendation. So 1, we know the patient's stable. 2, recent heart rate is stable. No new medications given that impact the heart rate. No vital signs anomalies detected. Vital sign remains within the default unit alarm limits because we optimize the default units first. Time since the last return to unit defaults is greater than 6 hours. So if all of those are true and the patient's stable, that's when we recommend a small adjustment. Let's say you as the clinician want to understand how to make the adjustments. So you can just click how to adjust. And here's the step-by-step for the device that you're standing in front of how to adjust it. And then right here, we create recordings of the nurse manager showing the nurses how to make the adjustments themselves. So this is really powerful because we're showing both the why and the how in the same interface. And we've seen dramatic reductions in alarms showing that this is working in an objective fashion. The other thing that's been really cool to see is that because of our ability to show the vasoactive medications overlaid on the vitals, which is unique, this is something that typically you have to look across multiple screens in Epic across tables and then try to put that together in your head. Whereas here in CalmWave, you can just highlight that vital or highlight that vasoactive and then see the impact on the vital. So the reason why this is interesting is that we've seen charge nurses put CalmWave up on the WOW and do rounds where they're looking at the impact of the titrations of their patients. The other option that we have, or the other view rather, is what we call incident patterns. So in incident patterns, what you're seeing here are the clusters of vital sign abnormalities, again, overlaid on the floor plan. And then we're also showing not only overlaid on the floor plan, but time aligned as well. So each of these rows is a room stacked ranked by the patients with the most incidents. So let's say, for example, we look at the patient in room B357. So these are examples of incidents. What's fascinating about our incidents is that we see incidents start between the alarm limits. And the ramifications of that mean that we're seeing instability and abnormalities within the alarm limits, meaning there's no audible cue whatsoever that this is happening. And we now have a growing library of cases. For example, when we see a nurse accepting a CalmWave recommendation of going from a high heart rate limit of 140 to 125, and as a result, an hour and a half later, they receive 9 full minutes of early warning to a patient's tachycardia. Furthermore, the leading edge of the incident started a full 47 minutes before, which is really exciting. You can also click on an incident, and we're not presuming to make a diagnosis. Instead, we're just laying out the facts. This incident started at this time. There were 4 vitals associated with it. Here are the vitals, and here are the characteristics of the signals. For example, APPD vital anomaly detection caused by unstable signals from the vital, and current value has not been seen in recent history. So the way our platform works is first, for every ICU we go into, we do a retrospective analysis of that ICU's population data, minimum of 30 days, more is preferred. As a result of that analysis, we generate a phase 1 report, which is a comprehensive report showing why we're recommending a specific set of unit defaults. For example, we do analyses of that data, like looking at the first 8 hours of a patient's stay. How many hours did it take for the patient to stabilize? As a result, we use that time as the amount of time we need before we will ever recommend that a patient diverge from the unit level defaults, right? So the combination of these incidents and the threshold manager are extremely powerful. I mean, what we like to say is what we're doing here is we're empowering the clinicians to glean information from enormous data sets. This is what data science is for. What we do is math and statistics, right? Our lineage comes not only from enterprise IT operations, but data science coming out of aerospace, where they're accustomed to working with giant sensor data sets, right? And where safety is of primary importance. Now, as you build up on threshold manager, then incident patterns, we like to call ourselves the plumbers. First, we're coming in and we're fixing your plumbing. But then as a result, we also created what we call operations health. And operations health is the first objective measure of clinical workload based on the underlying data. It's not a smiley face, neutral face, frowny face, how are you doing? It's a composite score, and composite scores are really sort of an art and a science. The science is what parameters are you using, and the art is what's the weighting of those parameters. So it takes time to tune it up, but once you do, we generate these operations health scores, which are a range of 0 to 100. 100 is the best. For every nurse, we use the scores of all the nurses to score the unit. We use the scores of all the units to score the hospital. We use the scores of the hospitals to score the network. And then we benchmark the networks. So the ramifications of that are profound because a chief nursing officer can see the operations health of all of his or her units in a given hospital. The nurse manager can see the health of all of their nurses in a given unit, as well as the score of their unit as compared to all the other units in the hospital. And then finally, a nurse manager can look at an individual score and then say, wow, this nurse really needs a one-on-one so that we can talk about these things. And one of the things that's really important in terms of a design principle is that the only way you can get your operations score elevated is by making the environment better for that nurse, right? So here's an example. This nurse, we're at an individual lens for operations health. This nurse's health score is 42. Their benchmark is 70th percentile ranking as compared to their peers in that unit. There's been a 5% decrease in their score in the last 24 hours. Their risk of attrition is high. And this is a statistical analysis of that risk. So for example, what you see here is how they're doing day by day in the look back that we're in, 25th, 75th, and 99th percentile as compared to their peers. And then down here, we do an actual breakdown of the parameters of the score, as well as which of them are the greatest contributors to the degraded score. So when that nurse manager has a one-on-one with that nurse, they can say, wow, these are the things that I'm seeing. How can we help? Again, the way that you fix operations health scores is by making things better. So then if you go up to a unit level, now it's the same view, but now the context is a unit. And when you scroll down, you see all the individual nurses in the unit. Up here, what you're looking at is the score of this unit as compared to the other units. If you go up to a hospital level, the CNO can see how their hospital is doing as compared to other hospitals. Again, 25th, 75th, and 99th. And then here's the breakdown of the units themselves. So CalmWave is really a hospital operations platform, which starts by fixing the foundation.